The Sydney Ferry Network is one of the great urban transit ferry systems in the world. Each year, about 16 million passenger journeys are made on Sydney ferries, or just over 40,000 daily. The network has 9 lines which follow a conventional radial pattern, converging on the central city terminal at Circular Quay. There's another major terminal at Barangaroo on the western edge of the CBD and 34 other smaller ones which are dotted across Sydney's waterside suburbs. The fleet and wharf infrastructure are owned by the New South Wales State Government, which is also responsible for the timetables and fares, which are integrated into the general public transport smart card ticketing system known as the Opal Card. The government contracts a private operator, currently Harbour City Ferries, to crew and maintain vessels and take responsibility for day-to-day operations. I've always thought Sydney ferries are a great part of this city's public transport system, but there is room for improvement, and the purpose of this talk is to explain how this can be done. The first issue is connectivity. The best urban public transport networks are multi-destinational. In cities with dense populations like London or Tokyo, the metro systems are designed as high-frequency grids. It's easy for a passenger to navigate their way from almost any point of origin to almost any destination. They may need to transfer somewhere on the journey, but because services are frequent, the transfer wait is short, so it's quite easy to do. But the Swiss have shown that you can also have convenient transfers in a low-frequency network. They do this with an integrated pulse timetable, which ensures short wait times at interchanges, even when services have 30-minute or even 60-minute headways. In Sydney, if you only need to travel to Circular Quay and back on the same line, ferries work fine, but the CBD is not the destination of every journey. If you're travelling from the west of the city, for example, you may want to transfer at the quay for an onward journey to the Zoo, Manly or Watson's Bay. But there's been no systematic attempt to make sure those transfers have convenient wait times. With 36 terminals in the Sydney Ferry Network, there is the potential to travel by ferry between 630 origin-destination pairs. But because the transfer waits are usually too long, only 115 OD pairs currently have convenient all-day connections. The second problem is berthing congestion. Berthing conflicts are not always obvious to passengers, and that's because skippers often decelerate to avoid them, but they are a significant cause of delays. They're most obvious at Circular Quay, but they also happen elsewhere, usually when inbound and outbound vessels are scheduled to cross at single berth wharves like Rose Bay. This time and distance graph shows scheduled vessel movements between Circular Quay and Watson's Bay on the cross harbour route. Conflict between the outbound and inbound Watson's Bay ferries is built into the timetable, and it's repeated every half hour in the weekday off-peak and on weekends. The inbound boat is scheduled to leave Rose Bay only 1 minute before the outbound ferry is due out. A minimum of 4 minutes should be allocated to separate the departures. This would give enough time for lines to be tied, the gangway deployed, and passengers to embark or disembark, plus a small buffer. Another critical issue is passenger loading. The Manly Ferry loads and unloads very efficiently. That's because Manly Wharf and Jetty 3 at Circular Quay are customised to the vessel. But this isn't the case elsewhere at Circular Quay. Jetties 2, 4 and 5 are a compromise, one-size-fits-all solution. Vessels with a variety of specifications, including different freeboards, different vessel lengths and different gangway gate configurations, may all have to use the same jetty. This image shows an Emerald class ferry unloading at Jetty 2 West. Long gangways are deployed because of the variation in vessel freeboard, but because the gangways are so long, there's very little space between the end of the gangway and the wharf gates. Passengers disembarking the stern gangway have little room to squeeze past the midships gangway. Egress from the pontoon is often blocked or slowed by crowds waiting to embark. Other high-demand wharves like Watsons Bay and Milsons Point are slow to load too. Collectively, this means turnaround times are long and services are delayed when they are close to capacity. The way to fix these problems is to redesign the network and timetables and to integrate them with planning for fleet replacement and wharf upgrades. This will lead to a good fit between the vessels, the wharves, and the tasks they need to perform. And there are three principles of network design we can borrow from the Swiss in order to do this. Firstly, periodic or clock face scheduling to simplify the timetable for passengers. This also helps to simplify operations and makes it easier to fix systemic problems like berthing conflicts. It also makes it easy to add services as demand grows over time. Secondly, as far as possible, adopt integrated pulse timetabling to make it easier for passengers to transfer between lines, especially at Circular Quay and Barangaroo. And finally, use a modular approach to planning vessel runnings, and I'll explain what I mean by that later on. I've developed a new timetable that endeavours to follow these principles. This time and distance graph shows how the Watsons Bay timetable could look like. Ferries depart from Circular Quay at 4 and 34 minutes past the hour and return to the quay at 26 and 56 minutes past the hour. There is now a 4-minute separation in the departure times of the inbound and outbound ferry at Rose Bay, so boats can cross in open water and avoid a berthing conflict. If demand grows, frequency could be increased to 15-minute intervals with 4 boat runnings. The great thing about a periodic timetable is that this can easily be done without changing the schedule of the existing services and without creating a new berthing conflict. Ideally, all ferries converging on Circular Quay would arrive a few minutes before the hour and half hour and depart a few minutes after the hour and half hour. But because there are only 6 berths available for Sydney ferries at the quay, only 6 lines can pulse at the quay. These are the ones shown here. Red indicates an arriving ferry, green a departing ferry. 3 lines, Double Bay, Cockatoo Island and Parramatta River, arrive and depart off pulse, so their connections are not as good. For the 6 lines that are on pulse, passengers have very convenient transfer waits. The first vessel to arrive is the Mossman Ferry, followed by Manly, Barangaroo, Watsons Bay, Tarongazoo and Neutral Bay. They then depart in reverse order. When redesigning a ferry network, one of the constraints you have is the legacy fleet. Fleets can't be renewed instantly, so in the short term you work with what you've got. As I mentioned earlier, passenger loading at Circular Quay will work much better if individual jetties are customised to the vessels that use them. This table shows how vessels could be allocated to lines and jetties at the quay using the existing fleet. In this plan, Supercats are dedicated to the Watsons Bay line, departing from Jetty 2. The Emerald class boats will only operate from Jetty 5, with runs to Tarongazoo and Jackson's Landing via Barangaroo. The first fleet class will take care of all the other inner harbour lines from Jetty 4. By following this plan, pontoons for Jetties 2, 4 and 5 can be customised to the vessels allocated to them as part of the redevelopment of Circular Quay, which will happen over the next couple of years. At a later stage, when the Supercats are retired, the Emeralds could be moved over to Jetty 2 for the Watsons Bay runs, with the Zoo and Jackson's Landing runs operated by a slower, new inner harbour boat. This very basic animation shows how the ferries on the 6 pulsing lines arrive and depart at the quay. The first ferry arriving at Sydney Cove is the Mossman Ferry. It berths first at Jetty 4, followed by the Manly Ferry at 3, Barangaroo at 5, Watsons Bay at 2, Tarongazoo at 5, and finally Neutral Bay at 4. Transferring passengers have between 5 and 13 minutes to make their way to a connecting service. The first boat out is the Neutral Bay ferry. The others follow in 1 minute intervals until finally the Manly ferry leaves. This is what the Jackson's Landing to Taronga Zoo line could look like. It's a 2-hour cycle operating at 30-minute headways and requires 4 Emerald class vessels. After departing Jackson's Landing, the ferry stops at Pyrmont Bay, then Barangaroo, and then all stops to Circular Quay before terminating at Taronga Zoo. The timetable pulses at both Circular Quay and Barangaroo. This means there are convenient transfers to and from the Parramatta line at Barangaroo. Here I've added in the Neutral Bay and Mossman lines, operated by 3 First Fleet class vessels at 30-minute headways, leaving from Circular Quay Jetty 4. They're interlined with a 9-minute turnaround at the quay. As the timetable pulses at the quay, passengers have convenient connections for a forward journey to Jackson's Landing, Barangaroo, Watson's Bay and many other destinations. And now, to complete the inner harbour, the First Fleeters also operate the Cockatoo Island and Double Bay lines. Headways are 30 minutes in the peaks and 60 minutes off-peak, with a 5-minute turnaround at the quay. This is very similar to the current runnings for these 2 lines. Finally, this network map combines all the lines together, including the river, outer harbour and Watson's Bay over in the outer east. Apart from the inner harbour, the only significant change is to Watson's Bay, which now terminates at Circular Quay without through lining to Barangaroo and Pyrmont Bay. My proposal is that Watson's Bay should run in the weekday peak periods too, but if the government wishes to keep the Captain Cook operation to Watson's Bay in the peaks, then that could easily be accommodated too. Over time, services to the Bays precinct could be extended to include White Bay, Glebe Point and the fish markets. Again, all these lines could pulse at Barangaroo for convenient connections to multiple destinations. All electric water buses may be an ideal vessel for this purpose. Redesigning a ferry network is a bit like building a house. You have to get the foundations right first. In the case of ferries, this means a periodic timetable, pulse interchanges at the major terminals, using a modular structure to cater for future growth, and fixing problems like berthing conflicts and slow passenger loading. But network redesign must also be integrated with planning for fleet replacement and wharf upgrades. Without doing this, infrastructure investment is wasted. The solution I'm proposing will make ferries a truly connected network. It will increase the number of origin-destination pairs with all-day convenient connections from 115 to 485, a more than 4-fold improvement. And the boost for passengers can also be done at less cost to taxpayers, because a well-designed network is inherently more efficient. The network would also be safer, because vessel movements are more predictable and less haphazard. With the redevelopment of Circular Quay imminent, now is the perfect time for reforming the Sydney ferry network. Thank you for listening. For more of my views on urban transit ferries, you can see my blog posts at sydneyferryblogspot.com.